Great. We're holding 23b2. 20. Amar Reish Lakish. So what was going on? So yesterday we had Rebbe Eliezer. Remember, we're talking about the Truma Sadeshin, the removal of the ashes from on top of the Mizbeach. That's one. Besides the removal, there's something called Haitzas Hadeshin, the taking out. Rabbi Eliezer made the point that even a kohen who is a Baal Mum, a kohen that has a defect, is allowed to take out the ashes. Haitzas Hadeshin, because it's not an avodah. It's not a service according to Rabbi Eliezer. The question is, does Rabbi Eliezer say, what does he say with regard to Truma Sadeshin, the separating of the ash? Does he agree that Truma Sadeshin is an avodah, and therefore a kohen that has a Baal Mum cannot do it? Or no, he says anything to do with the ash, even to simply separating the ash from on top of the Mizbeach, is also not an avodah, and a Baal Mum, kohen Baal Mum, is allowed to do it. That's our Gemara over here. One last thing, it's going to come up in a minute. On the side of the article Gemara, on the Gemara side, you see it says Torah or Hasholem, and it brings down the various psukim that we use. We're going to be using today Pasuk Gimel. Okay, it's weird. Gimel is the first part of the pasuk, and Beis is the second part of the pasuk. Okay, but we're going to first focus on the Gimel part. All right, we're going to be referring a lot to that pasuk. So here we go. Just like there's a machlokes between the Tanakh and Rabbi Eliezer with regard to the removing of the ash, in which Rabbi Eliezer said even a kohen Baal Mum is allowed to remove the ash because it's not an avodah. And the Tanakh said yes, it is an avodah, and it requires a regular kohen. Kach machlokes beharama. So too is the machlokes with regard to separating the ash, the Truma Sadeshin, the act of separating the ash from on top of the Mizbeach. Rabbi Yochanan says no. Machlokes b'oitzah. The machlokes is only by taking out the ash, whether it is an avodah or it's not an avodah, which means if it's not an avodah, the kohen and Baal Mum are allowed to do it, and if it's an avodah, they're precluded from doing it. By Truma Sadeshin, separating the ash from the Mizbeach, Divrei HaKol Avodah. Everybody says it is an avodah, and therefore a kohen with the mum is not allowed, is ineligible to do the avodah. So it's a machlokes for Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Says the Gemara, my Talmud Reish Lakish. What's the Talmud Reish Lakish? The Rabbi Eliezer says even a Truma Sadeshin can be done by a kohen Baal Mum because it's not an avodah. Amalach, he'll say to you, if you want to tell me that Truma Sadeshin is in fact a full-fledged avodah, do we find an avodah that's valid when the kohen only wears 2 out of the 4 vestments? That can't be. Now look at the pasuk Gimel. It says, "V'lova shakoyin," and the kohen shall wear midoy bad b'michsei bad. He shall wear the tunic, and he shall wear the linen tunic, and he shall wear the pants. That's all it's mentioning. It's only mentioning the tunic and the pants. It's not mentioning all the other. It's not mentioning all the hat and the belt, which make up all 4. From here, it seems to say the pasuk that you only are required to wear 2 out of the 4 begotten to separate the ash. Says Reish Lakish, we don't see that anything that is allowed to be done with a full uniform. your pants and the hat and the belt. This pasuk clearly says the lavish akaya midoi bad, the tunic of the linen tunic, bad, and the pants of linen. But it doesn't say anything about the hat and the belt. From here is proof that in reality it is not an avodah. If it's not an avodah, even a kohen balmum is allowed to do it. Great. Turn the page, 23b3. 23b3. Rav Yochanan would tell you no. The Torah says clearly, straight out, the laws that you have to wear the tunic and the pants. And from there, we're going to learn out over there. We're also going to learn out from there implicitly that it requires, therefore, the hat and the belt. Rashi, about 20 lines up, 15 lines up before it gets wide, says, Gali Rachmana b'ketoines u'mechnasayim v'limdecha, and it teaches us, she'ena k'sheira b'bigdei chol shalai, that in fact you cannot simply separate the ash with regular weekday clothing. It's coming to teach us that in fact it's a full-fledged avodah. So why then does the Torah only mention 2 and not 4? If it means to teach us to wear all 4, let it say all 4. So now the Gemara explains. Why does the Torah just simply mention these 2 when in fact, according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's coming to teach us that it's a full-fledged avodah and it requires all 4? Why doesn't it mention the belt and the hat? It only mentions the tunic and the breeches. Says the Gemara, because the Torah is coming to tell us something. Midoi bat, which in midoi is a midah, a measurement, meaning the measurement of his tunic, to teach us midoi kimidosai, that it has to be according to his size. It can't be too big and it can't be too small. Michnesebad, right? And then it says his linen breeches, likatanya, to teach us. How do I know that nothing goes before putting on the pants? First you put on the pants, Shenema, and you shall put on the linen breeches, Yilbash al Basari, on upon his flesh. That the first thing that goes on his flesh is the Mipnasayim. By the way, from this Lashon Midoi Bad, the measurement that it should be measured, it should fit. This is where we learn that the tzitzis that we wear, the beged of tzitzis that we wear under our shirts, should be at the very least between 18 and 18 and 24 and 24. It has to fit us. In other words, an adult cannot wear a child's pair of tzitzis because it's not his measurement. It's part of a mitzvah of wearing, requires measurement. Reish Lakish, what does Reish Lakish do with this tzokin? Reish Lakish, who says that in fact the separating of the ash, the Trumas Hadeshin, is not an avodah, and a kohen balmum is allowed to do it. So what is he going to do with all these the limud that Rabbi Yochanan just taught? He says, I learned it out different. He says, I agree. Midoi kimidosal. The pasuk says, midoi bad. I agree that teaches us it has to be to his size. Why? Because the Torah uses the word midoi as opposed to kutontai. Kisainas baspadim. Most of the time, the Torah uses the word kisainas, the clothing. Here it does not. It says midoi, measured. It's coming to teach us it needs to fit. And And shaloye dova koina lemechnesayin. And this, that nothing should go on before the pants. That I agree. Me al basa nafka. We learn it out from the extra words al basa. Because if you look at the pasuk, all it has to say is belova shakoyin midoy bad benichna sebad nichna sebad. The words yilbash al besari should be worn on his skin. Where else is clothes worn? Obviously, it's worn on your flesh. So the words al besari are extra to be used. In fact, the word, if you look at the pasuk, the word yilbash is used twice. V'lovash hakoyin mitoy bad nichna sebad yilbash. And so the Gemara a little later is going to say, what are we going to do with the second yilbash? Obviously, that's also extra. So we'll get to that in a minute. Says the Gemara, name of Kitanoi. Maybe we could say this machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish is actually a machlokes of Tanoim. Because the pasuk says, like we just said, Al Besarai, my Talmud Loima Yilbash. What are we going to do with the extra Yilbash? Like I just said, V'lovash hakoyin miday bad, u'nichta sebad, Yilbash al Besarai. It's an extra word of Yilbash. It says twice. What is this pasuk coming to teach? What is the extra Yilbash coming to teach? Mal Talmud Loima Yilbash. To teach us that you need the hat and the belt as well to separate the ash. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda is clearly saying you need all four vestments to separate to do a Truma Sadeshen. Meaning that Truma Sadeshen is in fact a avodah. And if it's an avodah, that means that Kahanim that are Balei Mumim cannot do it. Rabbi Daisa says, the rabbis think they Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippurim to teach us about the vestments worn by the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, shekeshirin lekohen hedyet, that are in fact kosher for a regular kohen to use the rest of the year. Since the Kohen Gadol happens to use the white vestments as well as the gold vestments on Yom Kippur, because he doesn't wear gold when he goes into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, he only wears white, and those are the same vestments that the regular Kohen wear all year long. From here is proof that it could be used by the very fact, as we're going to see, that the belt is different. To remind you of an earlier daf, the belt of the Kohen Gadol was pure linen, but the belt of an ordinary kohen during the year is shatnez, linen and wool. So the Gemara is going to point this out. Therefore, it must mean that Rav Daisa actually holds that Truma Sadeshen does not require all four vestments, and therefore is not an avodah, and therefore a kohen who's a balmum could do this Truma Sadeshen. We're now on 23b4. Oh, my Rebbe. Stay Chuvas B'David. There are two rebuttals. Chada, number one, to Rav Daisa. Number one, the belt of the Kohen Gadol, which is pure linen, is not like the belt of the Kohen Hedyot, which is of shatnez. Begodim that we used on Yom Kippur, which the Kohen Gadol went into the Kodesh HaKadoshim to do the avodah. You're going to now tell me to Shamish Bem Kedusha Kalo are now going to be used to do work, do the avodah of less sanctity in the Heichal. Malin BaKodesh, the aim Moridin. We go up with holiness and not down. Elamat Talmud Loima Yilbash. So then what does Rebbe do with the word Yilbash? The extra word. We're now on today's daf, Chavdalid Amid Aleph. Give me 1 second, please. Okay. Says the Gemara, the Rabbi says Hashichakim, to teach us to use worn out begodim from the garments fit for Kahanic duties. Take a look at the top Rashi. To the Rabbi Shichakim, Shekesherin L'cholo Avodah. That worn out clothes are in fact good for any avodah. Ubilbad shaloy mi haye kiruyim, but they shouldn't be ripped. V'hachi kama b'savakim. V'az the Rabbi Doisa l'tamei, Rabbi Doisa goes according to his reason. Loy shayich hachal amem b'dohayla kula ilsa agav agra nisva. So in other words, that Rabbi Doisa says no. I could use the worn out stuff because it's not really an avodah. The Trumas Hadeshin is not an avodah, and I allow the Bali movement to use it. But Rebbe is arguing and saying no, that in fact he's like Rebbe Yehuda, that in fact it is an avodah, it requires all first services, but you're allowed to use worn out begodim in dealing with the ashes. Now, the pasuk goes weiter. All right, and now, if you remember, we said, let me say, go back to the previous Amid Bays. Just want to show you the pasuk. Now it says, Ufashat es begodov, and he takes off his clothing, Vilovash begodim acherim, and he puts on other clothing, V'hoitzi es hadeshin, and he takes out, not separates, he takes out the ash, el michutz lamachna, to outside of the camp, el mokem tar, to a place of purity. So what do we see? There's a change, and it says that's one pasuk. Now, with regard to the Yom Kippur, on Yom Kippur it says that when the Kohen Gadol leaves the Kodesh HaKadoshim and he finishes with the begodim, it says v'hanicham sham, and he shall leave them there. He takes off the clothes that are used to the Kodesh HaKadoshim and he leaves them there. From here it teaches us that it requires to be put into shemus, and it can never be used again. Rabbi Doisa says no. They are available to be used all year long for the regular kohen. So what does the pasuk mean? That the kohen gadol on Yom Kippur takes off the clothes and leaves them there. In fact, that the Kohen Gadol is not allowed to use these clothes on a different Yom Kippur. He has to get a new suit every year. So says the Gemara, my love, the Marsava Rabbi Yehuda holds avoidihi that the Trumas Hadesha, the separating of the ash, is in fact an avodah requiring all four vestments, and therefore a kohen that is a Balmud cannot do it. Umar Sava Rabbi Doisa holds lava avoidihi. It's not an avodah. V'harayo is that the regular Kohanim are allowed to use the clothing, the vestments of the Kohen Gadol that he used on Kippur, but the Kohen Gadol, he can only use 3 out of 4 because the belt worn by the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur was linen. The belt that is worn by the regular Kohanim all year long is shatnez, wool, and linen. So obviously they can't use all 4 vestments. And the answer is you don't need to, because at the end of the day, Trumas Hadeshin is not an avodah. Not an avodah. Kohen Balmum to do it as well. Says the Gemara, and maybe not. Loi, no. The Kula Alma avodah. We can say that Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Doisa both hold that separating the ash of Trumas Hadeshin is an avodah. V'hakam efligi. Ma'asav Rabbi Yehuda holds smicha kral rebuye. He says you need the pasuk to include the belt and the hat, because the pasuk went ahead and only mentioned the tunic and the pants. So we have the extra yilbash to teach me that no, without that extra yilbash, I might have thought because removing the ash is such a dirty job, right? The Torah is saying, okay, you could do it with only 2 of the vestments. You don't need all 4. Says Rabbi Yehuda, therefore I needed the pasuk to come and be pretty clear that I needed all 4. You don't need a pasuk to teach me that you need all 4. Once you say I have to wear some of the vestments, that's a raya that I have to wear all of the vestments, because it's all or nothing. There's no such thing as anything less than 4 at any given time. Says the Gemara, Boy Rav Ovin, Terumas Hadeshin Bekamo. how much ash needs to be separated in order to be considered that you did the service, that you did the avodah. Do we say me trumas ma'isa yapin alai? Do we learn it out of trumas ma'isa? This is the Levi gets ma'isa from Yisrael, and then he has to give a tenth of his ma'isa to the kohen. He has to separate truma from his ma'isa. Trumas ma'isa, just like he gets a tenth of people's tefua, that's so too he has to give a tenth of his tefua to the kohen. So do we learn out from here from Trumas Ma'isa Yafin Allah that you have to separate out a tenth of the ashes? Or no, I mean Trumas Midyan Yafin Allah. Or do we learn it out from the Truma of Midyan in Parshas Matis Maseh when they went to war? And they separated from the booty that was captured, they separated 1/500th, much smaller, 1/500th, and they gave it into the Mishkan. Says the Gemara, neither. In fact, it's neither Ma'aser Trumas Ma'aser that needs to be a tenth that needs to be separated, nor a 1/500th that needs to be separated. Tashma, the Tani Reb Chia taught in the Brayso, Nemakat Veherim. In regarding to Trumas Hadeshen, it says Veherim es Hadeshen, and you shall separate out the ash. V'neman lahalon Veherim. And with regard to the mincha, the grain offering, it says, you shall separate the kamitza, which is the scoop with the three middle fingers that you scoop into the flour, and whatever you can pull out with the three middle fingers cupped in your hands. Just like over there by the mincha, the herim. The separating by the mincha of the kaimitz is done with the shear of a kamitza. Over here, too, the answer is with the kamitza. Good. 24a2. Amarav says Rav. Okay, and again, what happens if a zar, a non-kohen, goes ahead and separates out the ash? He does Trumas Hadeshen. Is he liable for the death penalty or not? Says the Gemara. Amarav, avoidance 4 of the services. Zar chayiv aleim misa. Zar is chayiv misa. Zerika, throwing the blood on the mizbeach. V'haktara, the burning of the avarim, of the sacrificial offerings, and all the other stuff that goes on top of the mizbeach. V'nisu chamayim, and the water libations that are thrown onto the mizbech on Sukkot, v'nisu chayayin, and the water and the wine libations that come along with the kavanas of every day. V'leibi omar af Trumas Hadeshen, a Trumas Hadeshen, a zar that does it, it's chayav misa. V'chein tani leibi b'misnebi misnisei, and so learns Levi in a brayso. After Trumas Hadeshen, also Trumas Hadeshen is Chai Misa. Says the Gemara, my time at the Rav. What's the time of Rav that he only has 4 and he doesn't add in the 5th Trumas Hadeshen? Except because it says, you Aaron and your sons, Itcha Tishbues, and your son, you and your sons, you shall safeguard your kahuna regarding every matter of the mizbeach and within the curtain, and you shall serve. Avodas matono she'etenes kunaschem v'azor hakarev you must. I have presented you with a gift, a service matono, a positive matana of the service. The service is a matana to you. Of doing, of application, of doing, and a non-kohen who does it shall die. So now, matana avodas matana, a present of an avodah, is an active present, meaning an active doing. Okay, a positive, not a negative. Says the Gemara, avodas matana. A service of application, meaning a positive avodah, V'lo avodah siluk, and not an avodah of taking away. It's an avodah of addition, not the avodah of subtraction. This teaches us that a zar, a non-kohen, is chayiv misa, right? By a zar hakarev yumas, and a zar that approaches shall die. It only where it's an avodas matana, where it's an addition, an avodah that adds, as opposed to an avodah that subtracts. So therefore, in the case of separating the ash, you're subtracting the ash from the mizbeach. A zar is not chayiv misa. Va'avadetem, and the pasuk goes on and says, Va'avadetem, and you shall serve, right? Avodas tama. That means a concluding service. An avodas tama. So we got two things. We got avodas matana and avodas tama. Meaning that it has to be an avodah that completes. And not an avodah that has another avodah after it. It's only part of the process, not the concluding process. So that means a non-kind of zar only gets the death penalty when it gets to the final process. For an example, Zerika Saddam, because it's the final process of the avodah of Shchita, Kabbalah Saddam, Halicha, Zerika, right? But not something that's in the middle, right? For an example, in Halicha, if he merely carried the vessel that has the blood, that wouldn't be the end, because the purpose of carrying that blood is to do this Rika, which is the concluding avodah. Okay, we're now on 24a3. Levi, and what will Levi say? Levi does include Trumas Hadeshet, the removing of the ash, as one of those things that if a zar does it, a non-kayan does it, it's chayiv misa. What is he going to do? He's going to say, Rabbi Rachmana l'chol devar hamizbeach. The merciful one, the Kadosh Baruch Hu, included in the parsha of Trumas Hadeshet, in the parsha of the separating of the ash, the pasuk that says l'chol devar hamizbeach, regarding every matter of the altar. So there it is. It's very broad. So that includes afilu the Trumas Hadeshet, even though it is a subtraction avodah, not a positive avodah. The Rav would say l'chol devar hamizbeach is coming to include. Rav who does not include Trumas Hadeshet, l'chol zar yumas, that any non-kain will die, is not including in Trumas Hadeshet. Ahula,
where you holding it?
The bottom of Chav Dalet Amud Aleph. The bottom of Chav Dalet Amud Aleph.
Chav Dalet Amud Aleph.
Chav Dalet Amud Aleph. 24a3. The bottom.
Okay.
So what will Rav do with the words? L'chol devar hamizbeach, since he does not include Trumas Hadeshet in the prohibition, Vazar hakarev yumas, and any non-kayin that approaches will die. He says because Trumas Hadeshet is a subtraction avodah, not an avodah matana. It's an avodah siluk, a subtraction, not a positive. So, sorry, give me 1 second. I'm finding comments in my Gemara here. So here we go. It says Rav. This comes to include the 7 sprinklings that are made inside the sanctuary on Yom Kippur. And the sprinklings that are made in the case of the Mitzvah, that when he stands over there from the outside Azara, coming into the Ulam, into the Heichel, gets sprayed already. The Levi says, Naftale medavar the kol devar. He says, this is learned out that when it says over there, it says, L'chol devar hamizbeach. It didn't have to say L'chol devar hamizbeach. It should have said L'dovet l'dvar hamizbeach. For the things on the mizbeach, what's the extra word? L'chol, right? For every matter, it should have said Lidvar HaMizbeach, the matters of the Mizbeach. What's the chomer for all matters of the Mizbeach? Says Levi, that the Torah is coming to add the word every to teach me this halacha with regard to the spring. Says the Gemara, no, Levi's got a good point, Rav. Rav, Devar, V'chol Devar, Loy Dorish. He says, nah, the Torah is talking in our language. You know the way we talk expansive. So that's it. Don't put more to this than you can say. So now the Gemara says, Levi, you want to say that the words L'chol Devar HaMizbeach is coming to include the Trumas Hadeshen, the separating of the ash in the Pasuk V'Hazor HaKarev Yumos, and a non-Karev who approaches shall die, that even Trumas Hadeshen, even though it is an avodah, siluk, it's an avodah that is a subtraction, it's still Chayim Misa. Wait a minute. Then we got to think of Klal Uprat Klal. As you know, every morning we say at the end of Kabbanis, Rabbi Yishmael Oimer. Right? And B'shleish Esrei Midas HaTorah Nidreshes B'hem. With 13 different midas, measurement, the Torah is darshan. We learn out. So here we go. Ve'ema l'chol devar hamizbeach, for regarding every matter of the mizbeach of the altar, klal. That's a very big generalization. Painting with a big brush. Then it says avodas matana. You remember we said like this, it says, Atu v'necha itcha tishvu es kunaschem l'chol devar hamizbeach u'lebeis haparoiches v'avadetem avodas matana she'etein es kunaschem v'azor hakarev yumos. So it starts off l'chol devar hamizbeach, klal, it's a generalization. Avodas matana, a service of application, which is a lashon yochid. It's a singular lashon. Prat is a specification. It's specific. So now we have a rule. Klal prat ain't when I have a generalization and then a specific specification. Ain't the klal elamasha b'prat. It means I'm coming to limit the generalization, that it should contain nothing more than what's in the Pacific. The Pacific is coming to narrow down the generalization, meaning ma'avodas matana, in that only a service of application, a positive, an addition, a service that adds that a zor that does it, a non-kind that does it is chayiv misa. Avoida silok, but an avoida that subtracts, i.e., the separation of the ash, loy does not carry the death penalty. So, Levi, how could you say that from l'chol devar hamizbeach we learned that even shumas hadeshen, a non-kayin is chayiv misa if he does it? It's the classical case of klal or prat. The generalization is limited by the Pacific. And since the Pacific is an avodas matana, only a addition, a positive avodah, an avodah that adds, a zar that does it is chayim misa. An avodah that subtracts, a zar is not chayim misa. Amakra, says Levi, will tell us. And now we're on Amid Beis. Chavdalid Amid Beis. He will tell us like this, right? Now, give me 1 second. Ulibase, he would tell us like this. The pasuk says, "Ulibase haparoiches va'avadetem." The pasuk said, once again, the pasuk said that regarding the chol devar hamizbeach and ulibase haparoiches, within the curtains va'avadetem, you shall serve a matana, right? You shall serve avodas matana. Says the pasuk. It says over here, El Beis Leparoiches, that's only within the curtains. The what is inside the curtain? The Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies. That's where you say, who da avoidus matana v'loy avoidus siluk. There you could say only a non-kayan is liable for the death penalty, only if he does an avodah that's a positive, not if he does an avodah of removal. But outside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, in the Heichal, and on the Mizbeach HaPanimi, on the inside of the Mizbeach and so forth, I would argue, Afilu Avodah Siluk. Even in
there's only a slight problem here.
Yeah.
Zor can't go to the Kodesh HaKadoshim.
Inside the Kodesh Kodeshim, where do you have Avodah Siluk?
Okay, so Daddy, number one, Charlie's question. A Zar can't go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, period. If a Zar...
if he goes into the Kodesh, he's dying anyway. No
he's
matter what he
anyway,
does.
But the Kohen Gadol isn't there. So
No, but
we're learning about a Zar.
We're learning about a Zar. How does he even
if a Zar goes in? But there is no Avodah Siluk altogether there.
Not so. The removal of the Ketores. Remember, the Kohen Gadol brings with his teeth the pan. He brings with his teeth.
Back.
What does he do? Repeat that. He takes it
at the
back.
end, but afterward.
That doesn't matter. He's removing the pan from the Kodesh HaKadoshim. He's subtracting from the Kodesh HaKadoshim the Avodah. I'll give you something else, Daddy.
So
what
that's called
happens
a
if you don't do?
If I take away my shovels, that's a Avodah
Siluk? Yes. And not what's Trumas Hadeshen, Daddy? Trumas Hadeshen is separating the ash from the Mizbeach. I'm removing it from the Mizbeach. I'll give you another one.
Trumas Hadeshen is subtracting, or is it Hotzah that's subtracting?
No. I'm subtracting the ash from the Mizbeach.
Right.
Removing. It's a negative. It doesn't matter what the negative is. It's an act of removal.
You're saying both of them are a negative.
That's exactly right. I'll give you another one. The blood that the kohen goes and sprays on the curtain. He's spraying the blood. He's got leftover blood. The leftover blood doesn't sit in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. It's got to come out. If a Zar does it, mashma from here, if somehow a Zar could go in a box.
But he can't.
He could go in a box to fix it up. He's not, if he had to, but he's not allowed to go. But Charlie, the reason why the Gemara doesn't hang on this, because the Gemara is going to go away from this right away. And the Gemara does this a lot. A lot of times, Charlie's point is very good. A Zar, the question doesn't get started. The Zar can't live. The answer is, the Gemara knows this, of course. It's just trying to...
I would hope so.
Right. It's trying to establish the theorem. It's trying to establish the rule. It doesn't matter that the rule, in fact, can't
never
be
happened.
applied. That's not the point. The point is, let's establish. And now the Gemara doesn't even get caught up because the Gemara is going to blow this out anyways. Here we go. If this was true, then the pasuk which says, "And you shall serve," that only concluding. Remember what we said. Only avoidance that finish up like Zerika. A Zar is chayiv misa. But if the Zar does halicha with carrying the blood, right? It's not a concluding. He's not chayiv misa. Then I would have to say, el mi beis laparoiches. That is only within the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Hu da avodas tama v'lo avodas sheyesh achrei avodah. But only this avodah, not an avodah that has another avodah after it. For example, Daddy, take a look at number 3 in the Odd Scroll, quoting Rashi, putting the Ketores on the burning coals. Okay? So, ha b'chutz. But if you're talking about outside on the Mizbeach in the Azor, the Mizbeach HaChitzon, right? He would be liable for Chayiv Misa, even for an Avodah, which has an Avodah afterwards. So,
Right.
and yet, Levi rules that only in concluding services is the Zar Chayiv Misa, not in the middle. Hada Areva Kra, by adding the word this and, not Avadatem, but the Avadatem. Then you just serve. Instead of saying, it's called, in the Lashon of the Gemara, it's called Vav HaMoisif. The Vav that's coming to add. There's something called Hey.
Or the Vav Achibo.
Or the Vav, but here it's a Vav HaMoisif. There's a saying that says, Hey HaYediyah, the Hey, Ha, the Hey is coming to teach me something.
Connects with what's before. Yeah.
Coming to be the Vav HaYediyah, or the Vav HaChibur that's coming to connect or to add. Here it's coming to add. Hadar Arei Arvei Kro, that it's coming to add. This puzzle goes back and links it to what was before, which is every Chol Tavar HaMizbeach, to everything, to all matters of the altar. Since it goes back to that, the bit is connecting it back to the original. It means everything has a problem. So now, Levi holds that a non-kayin is chayiv misa for only stuff that's removable if it's related to the mizbeach in the courtyard, and if it's not performed in the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So now we've got the outside of the Azara, we've got the Kodesh HaKadoshim, we forgot to discuss the Heichal. What about the Heichal? The sanctuary of Abaye Rava, Abaye Siluk Beheichal Mahu, regarding an act of removal in the sanctuary itself, a subtraction of Aida inside the Heichal. What's the din? Lifnim Medamale, is it compared to the Kodesh HaKadoshim? Because the Kodesh HaKadoshim is really part of the Heichal, it's just a more holy part of the Heichal, which therefore does not carry the death penalty. We said only an avodah that is a positive, avodas matana, only a positive is chayiv misa if a zar does it. Or lechutz medamale, or do we compare it to the service on the outside, on the mizbeach hachitzai, on the kaplan mizbeach, which does carry the death penalty? Says the Gemara, Hada Pashta, then he solved it. The pasuk says, "Mi base, uli mi base, ha'paroiches, uli mi base leparoiches." Therefore, you see it compares it to the Holy of Holies, to the Kodesh HaKadoshim, meaning that the exemption from the death penalty only applies not only in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, but even in the Heichal. If you do an avodah, that's a subtraction. A zar is not chayiv misa. Now, since Rava only asked regarding, you'll notice what it called. It only asked regarding removal, right? Of removal subtractions. He obviously assumes that on the contrary, that if you do an avodah, if a zar does an avodah in the heichal, that adds. That's a positive imatana. It's a positive avodah. It adds. It's an addition avodah that a zar would be chayiv misa. So the Gemara challenges, and this is where more or less we're going to stop, because we're going to stop very very quickly. Elamayata zar shesider es hashulchan l'chayiv, a non-kayin that arranges the lechem upon him on the gold table should be chayiv misa. The Gemara, no, it could see the bazichen. You're wrong. It's not a concluding avodah. It's only a middle. It's part of the process, because you have to arrange the spoonfuls of the levina, of the spices. Said the okay, say the bezich and the chayiv. So if he arranges the spoons of levina, you should be chayiv misa. Ikasiluk v'aktara. You're wrong. It's the removing of the challah from Shabbos to Shabbos and the burning of the levina on the altar, which taka If he would do the removal of the challah on the next Shabbos and burn the lavodah, he would be chayiv misa. But the middle avoidus, he's not chayiv misa. And now the Gemara said same thing with the menorah. Zosh asida sa menorah l'chayiv. A non-kayin that arranges the menorah should be chayiv misa. So the Gemara, no, it couldn't see us psila. What do you mean? You have to put in the wicks because he's cleaning out the menorah. That's only the beginning. It's only part of the process. It's not a concluding avodah. So says the Gemara, okay, nasa psila l'chayiv. Whoever puts in the wicks should be chayiv. Says the Gemara, you can see the shemen. What are you talking about? After you put in the wicks, you got to put in the oil. So it's only a part of the process. So says the Gemara, no such shemen l'chayiv. So he puts in the oil, it should be chayiv. Says the Gemara, ikahad laka. What are you talking about? You have to light it. So he said, okay, hidlik l'chayiv. The one who lights the menorah should be chayiv if he's not a kohen. Says the Gemara, had laka lava boidi. Lighting the menorah is not an avodah. The avodah is that the menorah needs to be lit. The actual lighting of the avodah is only a hechsher mitzvah. In order for it to be lit, I need to light it. But lighting, in fact, is not the mitzvah. What makes this shver very hard is because in Parshas Baloischa it says Va'aron sheba Baloischa saneros below that who should light the menorah? Aaron should light the menorah. That makes it very hard. Okay, but that's where the Gemara is right now. Let's just go a little further over here. 24:3. So it says the Gemara below. Are you really telling me that lighting, kindling, is not considered an avodah? But how do we learn? B'nosnu b'nei Aaron hakohen. Eish ala mizbech va'orchu eitzim ala eish. The sons of Aaron, the kohen, shall place the fire on the altar, and they shall arrange the wood upon the fire. Limeid ala tzoyis alisa. This teaches us that the act of kindling the chips, the wood chips, in order to start the fire on top of the mizbeach, that it can only be done by a kosher kohen, and with the klei hasharis, with the 4 vestments. So you see that kindling is an avodah. Says the Gemara, hatsois alisa avodim. Kindling of the chips on top of the mizbeach is an avodah. Hadlaka lava avodim. The lighting of the menorah is not an avodah, because in fact all they did is they lit a match, as it were, and they put it next to the wick, and the wick caught fire. So that's not called an avodah. The mashenka, the chips, they had to arrange the chips. You know how it works with a barbecue. You got to pile it up. You got to put your twigs. You got to put your things. You got to do things. So the Gemara says, so then according to you, a czar who arranges the fire on top of the altar should be chayiv misa. Says the Gemara, what are you talking about? You have to arrange the 2 blocks of wood. Remember, they had to bring 2 blocks of wood to establish the use.
There's another avodah.
Say the shnei gizim l'chayiv. Okay, so the one who arranges the 2 blocks, if it's a non-kohen, should be chayiv misa. Said the Gemara, what are you talking about? The whole reason for the fire is to arrange the limbs that are going to be of the carbon tumid on top of the fire, that have to dehek the chalovim, dehek the avarim, to burn the avarim. So it says the Gemara, and non-kohen that arranges the 2 blocks of wood on the bottom is chayiv misa. So you see, it is a concluding service. The fact that the meats, that the sacrificial parts go on top of it is a different avodah. So it says the Bahak of the thing. They're actually arguing in this. Mar Saba avodah tamahu. Rabbi Yochanan holds that arranging the shnei gizayitzim, the 2 blocks of wood, is the end, the concluding avodah of arranging the fire and putting the meats and the sacrificial parts on top of the fire is a new avodah. Umar Saba Rab holds lav avodas tamu. It's not an avodas tamu because the whole reason you have a fire on top of the mizbeach is only so that you can put the avarim, the hektar chalovim, the avarim, to be able to burn the sacrificial meats and fats on top of it. So the fire is only a heichah timtza for burning the fire. Anyway, that's where we're stopping today.